We were completely alone, deep in the Washington wilderness, until 2 a.m., when something started circling our tent in the dark, talking softly to itself like it knew exactly where we were.
My partner and I were camping way out in a heavily forested wilderness area in Washington. We had been completely alone out there for days. No other tents, no nearby hikers, just endless trees and a creek we spent most of the day exploring and fishing in. By night, everything felt normal, quiet, isolated, peaceful in that way only deep wilderness can feel. That changed suddenly around 2 in the morning. I woke up to my partner right next to me, quietly telling me not to move or make any noise. The urgency in his voice instantly snapped me awake. Our dog was already alert, sitting stiffly and staring into the darkness outside the tent. She wasn't barking, but she was growling under her breath like she was trying to hold it back. Then we heard movement. Something was outside. It started as faint rustling in the brush, but it wasn't random, like an animal. It had rhythm, like footsteps moving slowly through dry ground. Then came a voice. It was a woman, speaking very softly, not calling out, not singing, just fragments of speech, like she was talking to herself in the dark. We couldn't understand any of it, but the fact that it was human made it worse. There was no flashlight beam, no campfire glow, nothing visible at all. Just that voice drifting through the trees and the sound of slow movement nearby. It lingered in one direction for a bit, then shifted. The rustling moved around us, not rushing, not hiding either, just circling through the forest, like whoever it was had no concern about being heard. And then it stopped. Everything went dead silent again. For a while, we just stayed frozen inside the tent, listening, waiting for it to return. It didn't. No footsteps came back, no voice followed, only the forest again, completely still, like nothing had ever been there. My partner had already reached for his gun during all of this, ready in case anything got closer. But nothing did. Whatever it was, it didn't approach again. What made the whole thing feel so wrong was how isolated we were. We had pushed through dense, difficult terrain all day just to reach that spot. There were no easy access points nearby, no trails that would explain a random person wandering through at night, especially without a light. The next morning, we checked the area carefully, trying to make sense of what we heard. We didn't find anything obvious. No footprints we could trust, no clear sign of anyone having been right outside the tent. But farther up an old logging route, we did find a fire site. It looked abandoned in a hurry, just burned remains sitting there without any proper setup. The strange part was that the ashes still felt faintly worn, like it hadn't been long since someone was there. After that, we tried to rationalize it however we could. Maybe someone from a small nearby town, maybe someone traveling through back routes, maybe a lost hiker who got turned around and panicked. But none of it really explains it, because whoever we heard wasn't just lost in the woods. They were moving through complete darkness, talking softly to themselves, circling a camp they couldn't possibly have seen. And they never once made a mistake about where we were. I was hiking alone through a remote stretch of mountains in northern Vermont, days away from seeing anyone, where the forest got so quiet it almost felt unnatural, like even the wildlife was holding its breath and didn't want to be noticed. The trail was overgrown in places, barely there at all, and everything had that damp, green stillness that makes you feel like you're being watched even when you know you're not. On the second morning, around 7, I noticed something just off the trail. What looked like an abandoned campsite at first, but when I stepped closer, I realized the tent wasn't just left behind. It was completely torn apart, collapsed and shredded like something had ripped through it in the dark. Fabric hanging from branches, gear scattered in the dirt. Everything around it unnervingly silent, with no birds, no wind, nothing at all. Then I heard a faint, broken whimper. That's when I saw him, lying on the ground beside the wreckage. At first I genuinely thought he was dead, but then his hand twitched. He was barely conscious, covered in deep cuts and puncture wounds. Not like a clean animal attack, but more like something heavy had been moving over him again and again, dragging and shifting its weight in panic or confusion. His eyes were wide open, fixed on the trees, like whatever did it was still there, just waiting for the right moment to come back. He couldn't really form words, just fragments, sharp breaths, and sounds that didn't fully make sense. So I tried what I could with my first aid kit, but even while I was working on him, I knew it wasn't enough. There was no signal, no road nearby, no way to get help fast enough. So I made the call to leave him and run for the nearest chance at rescue. I pushed harder than I ever had in my life, stumbling down the trail, not stopping even when my lungs felt like they were burning, until I finally reached the road and got a passing truck to stop so they could call emergency services. When we eventually came back with rescuers, he was somehow still alive. Later, I learned he survived the hospital, and what happened turned out to be almost worse in its simplicity. He was a first-time camper who had hung his food for bears like he was told, but he tied it directly above his tent. During the night, a black bear climbed the tree to reach it, and in the process used the tent for balance as it moved down. He woke up underneath it as it shifted overhead, its weight pressing through branches, claws tearing through canvas, and anything in its way again and again as it climbed. Not attacking in the way people imagine, just moving, indifferent and unstoppable. And the worst part is that when he was finally able to talk, he said he didn't remember most of the pain clearly, only the feeling of something massive moving above him in the dark, reshaping everything around him, and the absolute certainty that he couldn't escape it no matter what he did. After leaving the hospital, he never went camping again. A few summers ago, I was doing a long-distance hike across a remote part of eastern Canada along an old abandoned rail corridor, miles from real civilization, where some days I wouldn't see another person at all, and the silence at night felt heavier than it should. One evening, I came across what looked like a small settlement just off the trail, but the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. Old trailers sitting twisted on rusted wheels, burned out cars half swallowed by weeds, and cabins with boarded windows and sagging roofs, like the whole place had been left behind suddenly and never returned to. So I decided to stop there since I didn't want to push further before dark, and set my tent in an empty patch near an old pickup truck sinking toward a ditch, making dinner as the last light disappeared behind the trees. I fell asleep thinking it was just another quiet night, but sometime later I woke up in complete darkness to footsteps outside the tent. Slow, heavy, deliberate crunching on gravel that sounded unmistakably human, circling me without stopping, never rushing, just moving around and around my shelter as my body went cold and I stayed frozen inside, gripping a knife I wasn't even sure I could use, listening for a zipper, a hand, anything. But nothing ever came, only those steps continuing until they finally drifted away into the trees. I didn't move for a long time after that, convinced they were either gone or still standing just out of sight, waiting. And when I finally forced myself out of the tent, everything outside looked completely empty under the dim moonlight. No movement, no shape, no sign of anyone at all, which somehow made it worse. So I tore my camp down as fast as I could and left without even organizing my gear, walking through the dark forest with every sound behind me feeling like it was following, until dawn finally broke and I reached the road where I caught a ride into town and checked into a hotel just to lock a door between me and that place. What still sticks with me isn't that someone was there, but that they were close enough to circle my tent for minutes in total silence, and I never once saw them. And I still don't know if they were just a curious squatter or someone who had been watching me the entire time I was there.